Today we're going to talk about how to solve a quadratic, and there are different methods. The first method we're going to learn is how to solve a quadratic by factoring. And we are going to use the box method to help us factor. So you'll notice that there are a list of steps at the beginning to kind of help guide you along the way. So we'll be referring back to those as we do the problem. Okay, before you get started, the first thing you want to do is always check to see if the expression has a GCF. And GCF stands for greatest common factor. So for A, does it have a GCF? Well, not all three terms have an X, so no. And then 1, 3, and 10 are not divisible by anything, so this problem does not have a GCF. So then we're going to get started by finding the product. The product is found by taking A times C. A is in front of x squared, and C is a plane number. So 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. Sum is the letter B, and B is negative 3. Factors. Okay, factors. You have to find two numbers that will multiply for negative 10 and add for negative 3. So I would start by making a list. What are all the numbers that go into 10? So 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Now, if your product is a negative 10, that means one of the numbers is negative and one of the numbers is positive. So my first time through, I'm just going to guess that the negative goes with the first term. So now let's check and see, do any of these add for negative 3? Well, negative 1 plus 10 is 9, so that doesn't work, no. Negative 2 plus 5 is positive 3, so that doesn't work, no. So what that tells me is that I probably need to switch the signs. Okay, so go back to my numbers here. 1 and 10, 2 and 5. But this time, I'm going to put the positive with the front numbers and the negative with the second numbers. And then if you look, you will notice that positive 2 and negative 5, they do add for negative 3. So now we're moving on to the step where we're going to make the problem bigger. So instead of 3 terms, we want to make the problem have 4 terms. Okay, and then we're going to put those 4 terms inside of a box. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to draw my box. Boom. Split it into 4 sections. Okay, first term in first box. So 1x squared or x squared goes in the first box. Now, the negative 3x, we're not going to use negative 3x. We're going to take that out and we're going to replace it with my 2 factors, which are 2 and negative 5. You just have to remember to put an x with each one of those. So remember, inside the box, you do not write b. You write down the 2 factors that would add for b, and then make sure you put a variable with each one. And the last box is last term, which is negative 10. So inside the box, you should have x squared, 2x, negative 5x, and negative 10. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a GCF. Okay, so we're going to look at columns and rows. So let's look up and down first. My column here, and I'm going to circle it in green so you can see it better. If I look up and down there, what does x squared and -5 have in common? So what's their GCF? Well, they both have an x. So now I'm going to look at my other column. So 2x and -10. What do they have in common? Well, each number is divisible by 2. So now we're going to look at our rows. So we're going side to side. X squared and 2x. What do they have in common? Well, they both have an x. And then -5x and -10. What do they have in common? Well, they're both divisible by 5. And here's a tricky part. We can't start with a negative. So right there, that means we have to take a negative out because we start with the negative. So if you scroll back up here, you're going to notice that step 7, super important. It says if box 2 or box 3 is a negative, then you have to take a negative out with the GCF. Okay? So the information on the outside makes your answer. So on the top, we have x plus 2, so put that inside one parentheses. On the side, we have x minus 5, put that in the other parentheses. So that comes up with my answer. Okay, now let's move on to the next one. Is there a GCF? And the answer is no. So the product is 4 times 9, which is 36. Sum is -13. So what are two numbers that multiply for positive 36 and add for -13? So I'm going to make a little list here. 1 and 36. 2 goes in there 18 times. 3 goes in there 12 times. 4 goes in there 9 times. 5 doesn't go in there. And 6 goes in there 6 times. Now, if my product is positive and my sum is negative, then that means both terms are negatives. Boom, 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 boom. So which one of these pairs will add for -13? And hopefully you'll say -4 and -9. So now I'm going to make a box. And then first term, first box, so 4x squared. Second and third box are filled up by my factors. So -4x, -9x, and last term is last box, which is 9. Okay, so then we're going to look for GCF. So if I go up and down, 4 and 9 are only divisible by 1, but they each have an x. Up and down on the second one. Oh, starting with the negatives. That means I got to take out a negative. And then 4 and 9 are only divisible by 1. Sideways. 4 and 4 are divisible by 4, and they both have an x. Sideways on the bottom. Oh no, can't start with the negative, so make sure I take out a negative. And then 9 and 9 are both divisible by 9. So my answer should be x minus 1 and a 4x minus 9. Okay, third one. Is there a GCF? And the answer is no. So my product is 3 times 5, which is 15. My sum is 16. So what multiplies for 15 that will add for 16? So I'll make a little list here. 1 and 15, 3 and 5. If my product and my sum are both positive, then that means both my factors are positive. And then hopefully everybody says, oh, 1 and 15 will add for 16. So my factors are 1 and 15. So now I'm going to make my box. First term, 3x squared. Replace with my factors, 1x, 15x, and last term, which is 5. GCF going up and down. 3 and 15 are both divisible by 3, and each one has an x. Up and down. 1 and 5 are only divisible by 1. Sideways. 3 and 1 are only divisible by 1, and each one has an x. 15 and 5 are both divisible by 5. So my final answer should be 3x plus 1 and x plus 5. Okay. Scrolling on. D. Does this one have a GCF? And finally, I get to say, yes, it does, because I noticed 2, 4, and 30 are all divisible by 2. So your GCF is going to go out in front. And then inside your parentheses, you're going to tell me what you have left when you divide each one by 2. So that will be 1x squared minus 2x minus 15. So remember, take each term and divide it by 2. That's how I got the inside part. Now, when I'm doing the product, the sum, and the factors, that is only for the information inside the parentheses. So that 2 that's on the outside, we're going to kind of leave that alone for now. So kind of ignore that 2 for a little bit. Product would be 1 times negative 15, which is negative 15. Sum is negative 2. So what multiplies for negative 15 that adds for negative 2? So 15 is 1 and 15, 2 and 5. If my product is a negative, 3 and 5. Oopsie. If my product is a negative, then I got to have 1 negative and 1 positive. Okay. So I'm going to put the positive with the first numbers and the negative with the second numbers. And then hopefully everybody says, oh, well, if I do positive 3 and negative 5, they will multiply for negative 15 and add for negative 2. So now I'm going to make my box. First term is x squared. The middle boxes will be my factors. So 3x, negative 5x. And last term is negative 15. Make sure you don't go back to the original problem. Make sure you're looking at the information that's inside that parentheses there. Up and down. Both terms have an x. Up and down, both numbers are divisible by 3. Sideways. Both terms have an x. Oh, can't start with a negative, so I got to pull out a negative. And then both numbers are divisible by 5. So x plus 3, x minus 5. And then remember that 2 from the very beginning? We're going to take that and bring it down here and put it in front of the 2 parentheses, and we're done. Okay, E. E, you're going to notice, only has 2 terms, which means it's missing 1. So what is it missing? It is missing the B. So you're going to think of it as x squared plus 0x minus 25. So does it have a GCF? No. So my product is negative 25. My sum is 0. So what multiplies for negative 25 that adds for 0? So 1 and 25, 5 and 5. If my product is negative, that means I have to have 1 negative and 1 positive. And then hopefully everybody's going to say, oh, well, negative 5 and positive 5, that will add for 0. So now I make my box. X squared, negative 5x, positive 5x, and negative 25. So up and down, I got an x. Up and down on the other side. Can't start with a negative, so make sure you pull out a negative. And then each number is divisible by 5. Sideways. Well, they each have an x. Sideways, they're each divisible by 5. So x minus 5, x plus 5. Okay, now we're going to add a little bit more to our factoring. We're going to add the solving component. And when you're solving, you're going to notice that the problem now has an equal sign. Okay, so before we start factoring, we have to make sure that all terms are on the same side. So, i.e., make sure it equals 0, which our first one does. So, yay. So, what's our GCF? Well, all 3 terms have an x, so I get to put down an x. And then 6, 26, and 20 are all divisible by 2. So I'm going to put 2x out in front. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Take an x from x squared or x cubed and it becomes x squared. Minus 26 divided by 2 is 13. X squared, take an x away, drops to just x. Minus 20 divided by 2 is 10. Have an x, but take an x, so that means no x's. Product is negative 30. Sum is negative 13. So what multiplies for negative 30 that adds for negative 13? So 30, you got 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 4 doesn't go in there, 5 and 6. So remember, I need 1 negative and 1 positive. So I'm going to start with the first number's positive, the second number's negative, and then hopefully everybody says, oh yeah, positive 2 and negative 15. So now I'm going to make my box. 3x squared, 2x minus 15x, and minus 10. Up and down. Both numbers are divisible by 3, and each one has an x. Up and down. Both numbers are divisible by 2. Sideways. Numbers aren't divisible by anything other than 1, and they both have an x. So 1x or just x. Oh, can't start with the negative, so pull a negative out. And then 15 and 10 are both divisible by 5. So we're looking at 3x plus 2, x minus 5. Don't forget that 2x from the very beginning. Make sure you bring that down here. So now we're going to do the new part, the solving part. That's tagged on at the end. So for the solving part, you're going to take each thing and set it equal to 0. So 2x equals 0, 3x plus 2 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. On the first one, you're going to divide by 2, so x equals 0. First answer. The middle one, you're going to subtract the 2 over, and then you're going to divide by 3, so you get negative 2/3. Second answer. Last one, we're going to add the 5 over, so x equals 5. Third answer. And for your knowledge, the highest exponent in the problem was 3, and that will tell you how many answers you should come up with. So I've got 3 answers. Done. Okay, the middle one. This one doesn't equal 0, so we've got to move the terms over. So I'm going to subtract 10, and I'm going to add 8x. So we're looking at 4x squared plus 10x minus 24. Does it have a GCF? Yes. All three numbers are divisible by 2. So we got 2 parentheses 2x squared plus 5x minus 12. Okay, so leave that 2 that's at the very, very beginning of the parentheses. Leave that alone. Product is negative 24. Sum is 5. So what multiplies for negative 24 that adds for positive 5? And if you have to, make a list off to the side to figure it out. And hopefully you would say positive 8 and negative 3. So 2x squared, 8x minus 3x minus 12. Up and down, they have an x. Up and down, both numbers are divisible by 4. Sideways, both numbers are divisible by 2, and they each have an x. Sideways, oh, can't start with a negative, so take a negative out, and then both numbers are divisible by 3. So x plus 4 and 2x minus 3. Don't forget your GCF. Bring that down. Put it in front. Set each part equal to 0. 2 equals 0. X plus 4 equals 0. 2x minus 3 equals 0. 2 equals 0. There is no variable to solve for. So if there's no variable to solve for, that doesn't count. X plus 4 will subtract the 4 over and it becomes a negative. 2x minus 3 will add the 3 over, divide by 2. And remember, the highest exponent in the problem was 2, so you should have 2 answers, and they are negative 4 and positive 3 over 2. Last one. Okay, this one is unique because it is also missing a term. But this time we are missing C. We're missing the last term. If you're missing the last term, you can't do our regular factoring. Because if you try to do our regular factoring, that would make your product 0. And we can't have a product of 0. So if you're missing C, all you can do is a GCF. So both numbers are divisible by 6. And each term has an X. 6 divided by 6 is 1. Take an x out, so you get 1x or just x. Minus 24 divided by 6 is 4. Take the x out, and there is no x. Set each part equal to 0. So 6x equals 0. X minus 4 equals 0. Divide by 6, and 0 divided by anything is 0. And add 4. Remember, the highest exponent is 2, so I should have 2 answers, and they are 0 and 4. Let me know if you have any questions.